It's been over a year since I released the first video on 3 traits of a lone wolf empath, which you can go back and watch the full thing here. And whether or not you relate to labels, sometimes naming things has a way of drawing similarly relatable people together. And it's not so much the name, but what's inside the name. And in my first video, I talked about these 3 traits. So let's just review the 3 traits that I talked about in the last video before going on to 3 more traits of a lone wolf empath. The first one is you have a deep longing for connection, but also a deep longing for solitude. You experience deep loneliness while also experiencing deep contentment being alone. Hence, the lone wolf. You want to call yourself a lone rooster or a lone lion, whatever kind of animal, but lone wolf seems to fit for a lot of people too. The sense of aloneness versus loneliness is what creates this deep inner conflict for the majority of the lone wolf's life. Conflict between the need to connect with other people versus the need to connect with themselves keeps them in this quandary of questioning if something is wrong with them. Being alone is serving a very important purpose for the lone wolf empath because they have the most sensitive nervous system. For some lone wolf empaths, their nervous system are beyond repair, it seems, depending on the level of trauma they've gone through. So telling them that isolating is harmful for them isn't being very understanding of how healing their alone time actually is. Being alone is serving a purpose. It's allowing the nervous system to heal. Being alone provides a sense of predictability too. Being alone in your own space is healing because you've created a space that meets your sensory needs. So instead of staying in a heightened sense of fight or flight, you can easily switch to this rest and digest, meaning the regulated state of your nervous system. Meanwhile, the desire to connect with someone or something can leave a void for some people, while others, they feel absolutely content with the deep connection that they've made with themselves and this earth. The second trait I mentioned in the first video was that they were prone to cycles of addiction. And this addiction might not be to a substance, but it can also be to a person or even to work. Lone wolf empaths have likely learned codependent behaviors and might find themselves being a savior or a rescuer to other people's toxic behaviors. So before they've really understood how to be okay and stand on their own, just like an alcoholic depends on alcohol to make them feel better, codependency can be the same way, also known as a love or an emotional addiction that fuels their self-worth and ego. These imbalances and struggles to feel in control of their lives in some way might leave them feeling quite anxious. They might find themselves in a depression or isolation. The lone wolf empath will have to come to terms with the need to enter into a state of withdrawal, whether it's from certain people or to the substances or other addictive behaviors that have become damaging to their sensitive nervous systems. So that might lead them feeling quite bored. And if you're feeling bored in this process, it's a sign that you're doing it right. And what to fill your boredom with? Well, that's the third trait of a lone wolf empath is that they're highly creative. If you've been spending too much time caught up in those addictive cycles, then you might have been stifling your creative flame, or you may have been using it to fuel your flame. As I've come to know and work with thousands of empathic people, they are seen as the ones with the highest capacity for creativity due to their sensitive nature. We can hear things unlike anyone else. We see things in a way that no one has imagined, and we perceive experiences in a way that allow other people to join them in the beauty that this life offers. So as noted, the excessive time that they spend in their addictive cycles would likely take them further away from their creative callings, but when they gave themselves the time alone, free from distractions, this is where the magic happens. Now, before I get into those 3 other traits, let's break down what it means to be a lone wolf empath. Because we've got the lone wolf aspect of things, and then we've got this empathic side. Because I've noticed in people who identify not only being highly empathic, but also a lone wolf. They love their alone time. And an empath is someone who not only feels deeply, but feels the senses with all of their clair senses, clairaudience, clairsentience, clairvoyant, claircognizant, This is how we are sensing the world through sounds, sights, thoughts, emotions, and our intuition. The lone wolf is someone who's carving their own path, as I said. And likely many empaths will wind up following the lone wolf path because they sense the world and perceive the world in a way that is much different from most people. We can even use the term neurodivergent here, with traits that resemble one having experienced complex trauma. So, without further ado, here are the three more traits of a lone wolf empath. Number one, they are deep existential thinkers. Lone wolf empaths often question everything that happens within our society, deeply analyzing relationships, the purpose and meaning of life, and have a strong sense of justice and fairness. So, as they wrestle with the big questions involving the meaning of life, they may be prone to this existential crisis. They deeply value personal freedom, individuality, individual responsibility, and the pursuit of self discovery. They'll often be the ones left with the question in midlife, who am I? This will ultimately lead them into intense spiritual awakenings, leading to isolation. And this can happen at any age. Maybe not in a midlife crisis. This could happen in the preteen years, even. The world becomes too much, doesn't make sense. They don't relate to much of what is going on in the world, so they start to detach from it. And they enter into another realm, seeking this deeper understanding of themselves and what it means to be human. So, due to this deep level thinking and seeking meaning in everything, having to engage in small talk and surface level relationships is actually quite exhausting for them. Hence, why they will experience this withdrawal from mainstream society. There's this sense that you're on a completely different wavelength from everyone else because of the way you think and feel about everything. And speaking about being on this different wavelength brings us to number two, which is having this hyper awareness of energy. Lone wolf empaths are absorbing emotions and energy instantly, often feeling drained in social situations. You're not just going into a restaurant and finding a spot to sit down. You're going into a restaurant, you're sensing the energy, you're noticing the lightings, you're sensing the smells, you're noticing the lighting, and then you figure out where you're going to sit down. This is also what makes them sometimes avoid crowds and groups and prefer one-on-one interactions. And it's not because we don't like people, it's because sometimes they can be too much. And if you hear yourself saying people suck, this is not the lone wolf energy you want to embrace. Although you're not fond of being around other people, you're still part of humanity, whether you accept that or not. This is where your lifetime has landed you to be right now. Even though you feel like you don't fit in or relate to other people, it's important to transcend any negativity you have towards others and bring it to a level of neutrality. This might require something called radical acceptance. And who knows, maybe the reason why people suck, as you may say, is because those people have not yet realized their own path. They might need some time alone to recalibrate themselves, but they've been living in denial of their own truth. And when we live in denial of our own truth, well, we're not at our best, are we? So the lone wolf empath who has realized themselves understands how often they rely on solitude to detox their energy and to keep their energy clear and at its best. You recognize that because you are so sensitive to energy, it's important for you to respect this within yourself. And you'll notice when someone's energy is off. Keep in mind, it's because they're likely not respecting their own life force energy that lives within each and every one of us. Lone wolf empaths are just more keen to it. So take care not to judge other people who have no receptor for this. Finally, number three, they are reluctant leaders. Go ahead and check out episode number 5 in the Lone Wolf series, Leader or Loner, Why I'll Never Be a Leader. Even though many of us find ourselves in leadership roles, there are two factors to consider. Either we do it with the most non-traditional leadership style, meaning we do away with the power imbalance. We don't see ourselves as better than just because we're in this leadership role. If anything, we'd like to be considered an inspired teacher. And two, we won't take on these leadership roles due to our understanding of personal responsibility. We don't think anyone needs to be led or followed. We highly value the principle of personal responsibility, individuality, and interdependence. We see that everyone has an important role to play. And sometimes as a leader, you have to take on more responsibility that is actually unnecessary to us. So it's just not a good fit. Although many people will approach you to become a leader, manager, boss, whatever, you might take it because remember, you have a strong sense of justice and doing things right and following the rules. So you want to fix all the problems. Okay, let's face it. Because you see it as an opportunity to fix all the wrongs in the world. You see a disaster of an organization that lies beneath you, and here's your opportunity to get it all fixed up. But those are not always the best reasons to enter into a leadership role. Just because you have this strong sense of justice and fairness and doing it right and following the rules, that might actually be your injustice wound that still needs some healing. So just make sure it's coming from the right place. Now, along with not being a leader, they often won't seek leadership. Now, for a lone wolf empath who's not likely going to be a leader, they're also not going to seek it out either. If they have to work under a manager or a boss, they don't recognize that there's this hierarchy at play. All relationships are seen on equal footing. So it can be hard to take orders from someone else. Unless it's already something that you're keen on doing, but being told to do it might make you push back. But if you're working with someone who does well to mitigate the power imbalance, exudes a sense of wisdom that you know is really beneficial for your overall personal development, you feel a strong attachment to their energy, then a very good dynamic can take hold and benefit all parties. Just because the lone wolf empath might be the one hiding it in the back, not speaking out as much, or when they do speak up, it's coming from a very unfiltered, matter of fact, real, and honest place. Some might see them as a disruptor, while others see them as bold, maybe even a little mysterious, and garner much respect as a result. So, instead of leaders, we become mentors, healers, thought leaders, inspired teachers, which can be done on our own terms, within our own limitations, with our own boundaries in place, reaching for an overall win-win outcome.